I'm a,
Carl Gordino, to the white courtesy phone, please.
make that the white courtesy chair. I'll call the meeting to order, please. We call the roll, Doug?
Commissioner Alvarado,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Burke, Commissioner Dunn,
Here.
Commissioner Art, Commissioner Gilmetti,
Present.
Commissioner Guardino,
Present.
Commissioner Kehoe, Commissioner Cavaloni,
Here.
Commissioner Madaffer,
Here.
Commissioner Van Kannenberg,
Here.
Chair Inman,
Here.
Senator Bell, Assemblymember Frazier. We have a quorum.
Okay, well, good morning, all. We're going to start with item 64 today.
Yes,
Stephen.
Commissioners, item 64 is the Prop 1B reports. And as we had at the last commission meeting, we are focusing on the local bridge seismic retrofit. You should have in front of you a sheet, which is a score sheet. It's titled Tab 64, Local Bridge Seismic Retrofit Program Lack of Progress List. And last time it was noted that we have about 13 bridges, 9 bridge owners that were showing lack of progress on their design. In the meantime, Caltrans and the commission has received letters from 4 of the bridge owners, or from 5 of the bridge owners that indicate that there is progress. So they were not asked, they were originally asked to appear here, but now they've been disinvited because they are showing progress. We still have 4 bridge owners with 8 bridges among them that are still not showing any progress. They have been invited to the meeting to explain when and how they're going to get their bridges underway. It's been almost 30 years since the Loma Prieta earthquake. And money is secure for them to do these bridges. They're just not moving forward. The first people that were invited to be here is Sonoma County. Unfortunately, they had a family emergency, so they could not show today. So the next people are the city of Barstow. I believe Doming Gonzalez, their engineering service administrator, is here to tell us how they will be proceeding with this project to get it moving. They actually have 2 bridges. The First Avenue Bridge, I believe one is on the east and one is on the west. So if Doming is here. I guess they're not here yet. The next one would be the city of Lake Elsinore with Brad Fagrell, and he's a city engineer. Brad, are you here? Could you tell us when are you going to get this project moving and when can you complete it?
Sure. Good morning, commission members. My name is Brad Fagrell. I'm the city engineer for the city of Lake Elsinore. And I thank you for the opportunity to let me provide an update for you for our Auto Center Drive Bridge. The city recently completed a preliminary seismic assessment in August of last year. I've just been at the city a couple of years, so this project is important to me. And so since I've started at the city, I've got it back on track. So like I said, we have done a preliminary seismic analysis and assessment. Back in August of 2017, we invested $60,000 in the report for a consultant NV5. It also includes environmental assessment and rehabilitation recommendations. The next steps for us are we want to submit numerous forms, obviously, to Caltrans. Our local contact is Alberto Virgil Del Dios at Caltrans Local Assistance. We're going to be submitting next month our Exhibit 3A, 3E, 3O, and our 7B, the forms to get the project under authorization for PE. The city's goal is to have the preliminary study serve as a project study report and proceed based on its structural and environmental recommendations. And once the preliminary engineering is programmed, we'd like to move forward to a PS&E phase with an RFP in order to accelerate the retrofit. Our future milestones are going to be October 2018, to get our NEPA document approval. January 2019, RFP release for our PS&E consultant, and in October of 19, hopefully, go out for a construction bid.
So you expect to be finished with your design sometime in 2019?
Yeah, probably near the end of 2019.
And then you'll be able to proceed to construction?
Yes, absolutely. It's an important project for us. Like I said, it probably got put on the back burner with other staff, but now that I'm at the city, it's a priority.
Okay, well, we thank you, and hopefully you will not have to come back.
No, I don't plan on coming back. Thank you.
Our next is the City of Orinda. Larry Theis, the Director of Public Works, will be making an appearance here. They have 2 bridges on the list.
Good morning, Commissioners. I appreciate the time, and it's not something I particularly want to be here for, so I understand the importance of getting these bridges done. I've been with Orinda as the Public Works Director the last year and a half, and our 2 bridges have different stories, so to speak. One of our bridges, the Minor Road Bridge, we are going back. We had reached an 80% design level for a retrofit. There has been some additional discussions as to the need to replace the project, so there's been some further evaluation related to that issue. We've been coordinating with our local assistance rep in District 4 in how to proceed. So we are looking at a new 6A form with that particular bridge. That bridge, unfortunately, in the last year is within about 500 feet of a large culvert that we had to deal with as an emergency replacement that cut off a quarter of our city. So unfortunately, it ended up becoming a higher priority in that particular area. We have another bridge, the Bear Creek Road Bridge. The story with that was that the city's understanding at the time, roughly almost 7-8 years ago, was that when the costs for the bridge went up quite substantially, the city approached Caltrans at the time to request for additional funds, and they were denied. The reasoning after further research was more because of the length of the time of the project has been in the program. So we've outreached to Caltrans, local assistance, and they determined probably the best course of action is to resubmit the project. They feel that it can be, the full funding of the bridge can be attained, as opposed to where the city was looking at millions of dollars to cover the cost of that particular bridge. So that was one of the reasons the bridge was put on our unfunded list for the last almost 7 years. But we are confident in terms of both bridges that we're working diligently and looking at both bridges have a certain level of design. Some may need to be going back to some redesign, but we're hoping to have both designs done in 2019. And assuming environmental, with both have major creeks, San Pablo Creek that runs through our community, going underneath the bridges. We're looking at probably a 2020 approval of the environmental and looking for construction into 2021. But we do need to go back, secure the fundings through both the HBP programs for these both these bridges, and I do hope not to come back here, and we are understand the seriousness of this and getting it done.
Now, could you elaborate a little bit? When do you expect to be finished with design?
The design we're expecting probably in October of 2019.
October of 2019 for both bridges.
Yes.
And let me just reassure you, funding for these bridges is there. So funding should not be a problem.
Thank you.
So will we get, Stephen, on these bridges, will we get, instead of waiting until 2019, will we get some sort of a progress?
Yes, every quarter, the department reports on the progress of these bridges and their quarterly reports. And that's why we're bringing these people here, because we've noticed that there was very lack of progress. Now we're going to be watching these very carefully, and every every quarter is going to be a report specifically on these bridges.
Okay.
Now, also, regional agencies are also starting to get involved. Some of the regional agencies like MTC have told me that they will be telling their agencies until they solve these problems, they might not be doing any other projects for them. And the federal government is also getting involved. The feds are checking to see what is the progress and if any federal funds have been expended, are they subject to lapse? So there's plenty of pressure now being applied from every side that's possible, including from the commission side.
Commissioner Gamatti?
Thank you. You know, I realize some of you guys are new in town, et cetera, but this thing's been dragging out way, way too long. You know, Stephen just mentioned MTC's involvement. Your city councilwoman, Amy Worth, sits on MTC. I mean, she should be embarrassed that this isn't being done. You mentioned also that Caltrans is involved with you on this.
Yes, they are. The local assistance.
So
are-
I would ask Jim Davis if you could expedite this. Not having this bridge completed until 2021 is not acceptable to me. And the design work should be done much more quickly. So maybe, Jim, if you could help them out and push this thing along, I'd
It's actually
appreciate it.
Ray Zhang Ray Zhang from local assistance would be involved with this.
Well,
And
whatever.
Ray is here.
We need to expedite this. These schedules are way too long. Even the previous speaker are way too long. We've waited too long to get these bridges done.
Question.
Commissioner Medapper?
So question, this would be to Stephen, just overall on these projects, is the delay predominantly as a result of, there's a variety of issues, but how much more time is the environmental piece of this typically adding to it?
That I really couldn't answer. I don't know, because we're not that deeply
in.
involved in the process. These are local bridges. They're mostly at the local level. Caltrans is involved because they administer the actual funds, and the commission actually allocates the funds. That's where our involvement comes in. But some of these bridges, as I said, Loma Prieta earthquake happened in 1989.
Right.
It's almost 30 years. These bridges have been declared a top priority for the state back then. They are a top priority, and funds are available to fully fund these projects. Originally, there was kind of disputes as to where the match would come, because the majority of the funds come from the federal government. Local match comes from the state. Originally, the match was coming from the STIP. When STIP was having problems, local match was eliminated. And then when Prop 1B arrived, Prop 1B provided $125 million of bond money to be the local match for these bridges. So these bridges, for the longest of time, have had full funding.
Well, I do think it's an embarrassment, not only for the state, but the public should be outraged that things like this that would take so long. The reason I was asking the question regarding the environmental, the bridge is already there. I sometimes wish that, especially on retrofit projects, we could figure out ways that piece of it gets shortcut. So again, I look at it from perhaps if there's a legislative solution that we could be looking at, even in this session, that is something that I would certainly encourage. I think that if the public were aware, as what we read in the backup of all of these projects that have been delayed, there's no excuse for it. And I agree with Commissioner Tavallone. I think that whether it's a particular one you were just talking about or any of the others, we need to figure out a way to expedite these things. Or, so I would just ask through Susan, through our staff, if there's some kind of a legislative fix that could help push this along. If there's ways that, hey, jurisdictions don't complete this, then guess what? We're going to defund you on something else. There's got to be some kind of a hammer that is put in place because the accountability, with all due respect, it's really lacking here, big time.
And so commissioners, if I can. Yes. Commissioners on that, I think, before we would bring forward a legislative solution for you to consider sending over, we'll work as staff to get more details on, is it the environmental, what exactly would the solution be? And if it's nothing more than a remedy that, there's a mandate that these bridges get completed by a certain date, but give staff an opportunity to look into this further and bring back a recommendation.
Again, I'll just add one thing.
Yeah.
I don't know what our statutory authority is, but I'll tell you what, if there's an area where I think they haven't been performing on something like this, don't come to me asking for money for something else.
Well, I think the regional agencies are starting to apply that type of pressure to these bridge owners. Now, just to put some perspective on this, the original program started off back in, after Loma Prieta earthquake, but over, I think, about 1,200 bridges. We are down now to about 55 bridges that are still in the design stage. I think there's like 30 bridges in the construction stage. The rest of the bridges have been done, but they're just taking a long, long time for these, what I would say, laggards.
Commissioner Gometti?
Yeah, just, if it is environmental, I think we should be exploring mitigated negative decks on these things, because the bridges are already in existence, so, you know, we push something like that and make it go a lot faster.
That's the legislative.
Yeah, and the majority of these bridges, the actual solution to the retrofit problem is replacement of the bridges. So that's,
existing corridor.
I notice we'll be in Santa Rosa in less than 30 days. If you could, these bridges are very close to Santa Rosa. Maybe they could present at that time if they
Good
didn't
idea.
show up today.
Absolutely. I see Suzanne Smith. I'll work with her on that as well, and we'll bring forward a presentation at that time. And maybe actually we'll see if it's possible for a viewing.
Commissioner Dunn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One thing, and I don't know if this would be appropriate or not, but I'm intrigued by Commissioner Gilmetti's comment that we should be notifying the elected officials in the region and send them a letter directly that this is something we're looking at, and put them on notice as well. And so maybe that's something in our to-do list,
Yeah.
in addition to dealing with technical staff.
That's a great idea. Staff will do that. This is an information item, but staff will move ahead, and we'll get a letter for you all.
So, Stephen, I would like to ask if you could provide us all of our recourse options that we could consider, because I think it's pretty evident here from this body that the path we're on and the timing we're on is not acceptable. So, you know, if you have an aircraft that's deemed unsafe, it gets taken out of service until you can fix it. And so I don't know what our full range of options are, but I think it behooves all of us to at least be aware of what options we have in front of us.
well, I can tell you that the commission, as far as the commission goes, does not have very many options besides public shaming, and I guess that's what we've been doing.
Yeah, because I'm sure Rinda would like to take that Bear Creek Bridge out of service. There's a lot of traffic through their town. They do enough.
Well, I don't know, but if
Arterial.
we're going to be,
Yeah,
if something
gotta do
happens, we're all in this together. So I think 30 years is a very, very long time. So, Stephen, do we have more?
And no, we just had the four, and the one had a family emergency, couldn't be here. I don't know what happened to the city of Barstow. We're gonna find out between now and the next commission meeting.
Well, Director Berman, I couldn't tell if you were anxious to say something or not. Okay, well,
Our local assistance program does manage the program, but, and we do work with the cities to get this done. And we are also frustrated at the pace, and I think this is a good step forward.
Well, I think we even ought to probably look at maybe just taking it over and doing it and then having them pay for it. I mean, that's what a city does when you don't cut the weeds in front of your house. They just have it done and then put a lien on your property and you pay for it.
I don't know if we want to go that far.
Well, you know, when you got a bridge that collapsed on you because a culvert failed, and you got two more in the same position, you know, something's got to happen.
I don't have enough engineers on staff.
okay, well, let's figure out how we can all get this done. And
Yes.
obviously, we would like to not have.
Yeah, let's do something to put us in a better mood.
Shall we start with good morning? Oh, dear. Thank you for your report, Stephen. We'll move on now to item 57.
Yes, Commissioners. Item 57 is resolutions of necessity. It was on the consent calendar yesterday, but due to lack of having 8 commissioners, we pulled it off and moved it to this day. Now that we have 8 commissioners, staff recommends that you approve the resolutions of necessity.
We have a motion by Commissioner Madaffer, a second by Commissioner Gardino. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining for the record? Motion carries. Okay. We will now move to item 65, and my note says not before 9 a.m., so we've got that covered.
And Commissioners, before we start in on that item, the Commission has been receiving lots of emails, probably about in the neighborhood of 70 emails with regards to the Coronado Bridge. That is one of the projects that's that is kind of a people are interested in having suicide barriers on that bridge, and suicide barriers per se are not shop eligible and as suicide barriers as barriers, but just to let you know that we have received an overwhelming amount of emails. Now, Rick, you can go ahead with the intro to the item.
Okay, thank you. This is the Southern California hearing for the 2018 State Highway Operation and Protection Program. The before Caltrans overview presentation of the proposed 2018 SHOP and the presentation by Michael Johnson on the consistency with the Transportation Asset Management Plan, I will describe a brief and general overview of the SHOP development process. Existing law requires Caltrans to prepare and transmit to the Commission by January 31 of each even year a proposed 4-year State Highway Operation Protection Program, SHOP. Before projects can be considered for programming in the SHOP, they must have completed their preliminary planning phase, affectionately called a PID, which defines the project's purpose and need as well as the range of alternatives. In addition, projects proposed in the SHOP are informed by the Transportation Asset Management Plan. At the program level, the total value of the 4-year portfolio projects and reservations, including in the SHOP, such as emergency, is defined in the Commission-adopted fund estimate. Prior to submittal to the Commission, Caltrans is required to make the proposed SHOP available to transportation planning agencies for an opportunity to review and comment, and shall include both the comments and the Caltrans response in the proposed SHOP. Prior to adoption, the Commission reviews the proposed SHOP for sufficient consistency with the Transportation Asset Management Plan and is also required to hold 2 public hearings, and this is the second hearing. Upon completion of the hearings and a Commission finding of consistency with the Transportation Asset Management Plan, the Commission adopts the SHOP and submits the program to the Legislature and the Governor not later than April 1 of each even year. The adopted program, which contains project descriptions, project budgets, and projected delivery milestones for each phase, and project performance metrics, becomes the roadmap for the next 2 years. Any significant change to a program SHOP project after adoption requires Commission approval, as does any new project proposed between cycles. Next, Mr. Bruce DeTerra, Division Chief of Transportation Programming, will provide an overview of the proposed 2018 SHOP, including a discussion of any changes from that January 31 submittal to the Commission. Bruce?
Thank you, Rick. Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for this opportunity to talk with you about something that's very exciting and very important to all of us. And I'm not going to have a story about bees, but I would like to point out that we're turning a chapter, or we're coming into a new book of a trilogy, that the way we used to do the SHOP is behind us, and we're stepping forward and we're writing history together with the department and the Commission to create the next book in this trilogy of how we're going to deliver SHOP. So it's really important that we get it right, and how we start out on writing this first chapter is critical to how the whole book's going to unfold. But as in all trilogies, we're bringing some of that information from the previous book forward with us, and we're in that transition introductory period. So in my remarks, some of what's going to be affecting the SHOP is the book from before, the 2016 shop, the 2014 shop, and then going forward, looking to the 2020 and 2022 shop, so that we have a continuum of these shops. And that's the only way I could get something in that involved bees. All right, good, this is working. So again, to go over very briefly in regards to the basics of the shop, because I know we have folks both in the audience and who may be viewing this who are not familiar with the shop, there'll be a little redundancy here. But the point of the shop is to maintain and preserve our existing state highway system assets. Very critically, it's existing assets and it's on the state highway system. It's our Fix It First program. Safety and emergency response repairs, which we've become much too accustomed to in recent couple years, remain the highest priorities. And I emphasize on the bottom here again that it's maintaining the existing system, so we can't add new traffic lanes to the system, mixed flow or otherwise, of adding new lanes. So the MAP 21 started off some of our new things of connecting to asset management that Mike Johnson addressed quite eloquently yesterday with the performance target, so I won't go over this again, other than, again, congratulating Mike on having his plan, the first in the nation certified as meeting the new federal requirements. That's awesome. Again, as mentioned yesterday, SB 486, Senate Bill 486, requires the robust asset management plan no later than the 2020 shop, and we've achieved that with the 2018 shop, which is remarkable. And again, hard work with both the commissioners and commission staff and the department. And Rick already covered the approving those. So again, it's limited to capital improvements on the existing system. And the adoption, and the commission may decline to adopt the shop if it's not sufficiently consistent with the asset management plan, and Mr. Johnson will be addressing that after my presentation. Road Repair and Accountability Act, SB 1. This is what enables us to write the new chapter. We had direction to write the new chapter under 486, or the new book. This gives us the ability to actually implement this. $1.6 billion in new funding for the shop, for the 2018 shop per year. It's a remarkable amount of money, but it is targeted to the 4 asset classes in order to achieve the performance targets that you saw Mike present yesterday. So this isn't money that we just get to distribute around to the shop for a lot of purposes and address needs that people have been wanting to do. These are the asset management-based needs that are identified through an asset management performance targets and understanding our existing conditions. We also have the enhanced transparency and accountability that we didn't used to have in the shop. A lot of the previous shops were a little bit mysterious to those who were not directly involved, and frankly, it was a little mysterious to those who were directly involved as to how decisions were made. And we're doing our darndest to be as transparent as possible, and where that transparency doesn't exist, to be able to come back to you. We may have to do some research because we do have historical projects, but come back with the answers to things so that when you vote a project for funding, you know why that's in there and how it's going to be moving us to achieving the targets. Let's see, again, we're focused on the 4 asset classes, pavement, bridge, culverts, and TMS elements. And TMS, those are those management systems that enable us to operate the highway system effectively. And we are set to reach the targets by 2027 if we keep on this track of investing. And I'm going to come back to that in just a little bit. We have the performance targets that the commission adopted. Missing from this current slide that I have up there is the bridge of 98.5%. I don't know why I didn't type the bridge in there, but it used to be in there, and I did something between the last one and this version in my update. But we are still, the 98.5 in good or fair condition on the bridges is still part of the program, even though it's not on the slide. Okay, shop basics for 2018. It's the years for the 2018 shop, years 2018 through 21-22. It's fiscally constrained to the 2018 fund estimate, which assumed, which it should, rightly so, the continuation of Senate Bill 1. It contains approximately 1,000 projects. The commission is taking various actions at this meeting that moves the dial on some of these projects just slightly one way or another, and that's going to be something that continues with the shop, that it's a very large program of projects that we are developing and getting more information as we go along, so there's slight adjustments, particularly at the changing of the shops, of the adoption of the new ones. We are $7.9 billion over the previous 2016 shop, but again, that money is targeted towards meeting the 4 asset classes. It is consistent with the SHSMP which used to be the 10-year shop plan that the commission reviewed and approved previously. And I will claim before Mike gives his presentation that it is also consistent with the Transportation Asset Management Plan, but Mike will be addressing in more detail how it actually does that. So it's important to identify assets versus objectives, so that the assets are that tangible thing like the podium, but this presentation is an objective. I'm standing at the podium giving you information, but the information itself is not an asset, even though it's important for you to know. So there are a lot of things in the highway system. Mobility is one of those intangibles that you can't go and build mobility. You can create the infrastructure to provide for that, but it isn't something that we can do. So it's important that the shop just addresses the tangible physical assets. System expansion objectives, which are legitimate and are certainly needed, are addressed through other funding programs, including under SB1 for the competitive programs that you'll be addressing at the May meeting, the STIP, which was adopted earlier, federal funds, if we can get that longer arm to pull up all that money out of that pocket, and other non-shop funds. Okay, the O in shop. There is an O in shop, the operations. And again, but the operations itself is an objective. So the physical things that we can do within the shop using shop funding would be truck climbing lanes would be an example where we're adding some new capacity in a sense. Some could see that as new capacity, but it's a very limited operational need on there. Auxiliary lanes for merging and weaving, intersection modifications, things like that, including roundabouts. And shoulder winding and a few other things. Okay, so when I mentioned earlier when I started that we're carrying over shops from the previous cycles, this demonstrates the overlapping of the shops. So you always have the history of previous shops coming forward because it takes a while to develop projects and to deliver them, hopefully not 30 years. So here we have objectives and time scales that we're achieving things in a much narrower time period. So you can see how the previous shop interacts with the 2018 shop, and by the time we get to the 2020 shop, it's all new projects, almost all new projects. There'll be some very long lead projects that have taken longer to get here, but the relative portion will be much smaller. But by the 2020 shop, we'll be in that robust asset management paradigm where we're moving forward, where all the projects coming through, the new ones, are all intended to address asset management. So this is relative investments by the asset classes. So you can see that the 4 primary asset classes for maintaining and repairing those takes approximately 70% of the shop. So diverting money from that 70% to achieve other outcomes or other purposes will necessarily diminish how much we're investing and would jeopardize our ability to actually reach the targets. We really are close on this as demonstrated by Mike. So we have to stick to this over the 10 years. But if I could point out on my previous slide, each one of these cycles from 16 to 18 to 20 to 22 lets us go back and re-examine, are we on track? And if we're not, we can come in and adjust projects, bring in new projects, accelerate projects, do things to make sure that we're still on target. And that's an important aspect of the shop, that we check in every 2 years and update where we are. And we update costs, we update scope, whatever it is that needs to bring to you so that you understand the path that we're on and that it's the right path. And if we need to adjust, that we have that opportunity to meet these targets. Okay, these are some of the actual asset particulars. And again, as we adjust projects, the 5,576 lane miles might change to 5,578 or things like that. So that's, even though there's an implication of precision when you get down to that level, it can vary by project. This is the distribution of all the shop projects in the state that we currently have. Actually, it's a point in time from the last hearing. We are not adjusting all these by hearing for the GIS work takes quite a while to get all these locations. So I'm going to go through a few of these, but you can see the distribution around the state, and then the principal 4 asset classes are the ones that are really highlighted in the brighter colors. So here's pavement around the state, and you can see that we have a fairly good distribution. There are some perceptions that we spend more in some areas than others, and that is true, and that is because we are asset management based. There's not an entitlement to particular funding shares by region. It goes by what the condition of the assets for that particular asset class is. So we have a lot of areas that have very old pavement that is falling apart, and we have a lot of areas that have very new pavement because of earlier investments. And Mike alluded to that, where bringing in new assets can move the needle one way or another, as he talked about with the TMS elements. If you bring in new TMS elements, then your overall share of health goes up. Bridges, not surprisingly, we have a lot in the North State, though we don't have a lot of population there. There are a lot of issues with bridges, with a lot of water flowing. Culverts, we're still, again, developing the full inventory on that. And then TMS elements, not surprisingly, is concentrated in the urbanized areas. So here's the distribution for Southern California, so you can get an idea of how the LA Basin and San Diego areas, the distribution generally of projects. Bay Area concentrated on key corridors. And the San Joaquin Valley, again, very, very important in the connectivity between the two major regions and providing connectivity to the U.S. Southwest as well. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, or to pass this over to Mr. Johnson and hold questions until after he's given his presentation, however you'd like to handle it.
Do you all have any questions for Bruce since he's up there right now?
Okay. Thank you.
You speaking on the B item predominantly?
Oh, yeah, I think I'm letter B. So
Okay, good.
yes.
So I was looking at your response, or the response on Caltrans on comment 9, where it was identify each long lead project in the proposed program, the critical task, activity. And so there was, in the Caltrans response, and again, this kind of gets to the last item, and I'm not expecting an answer other than to ask Ms. Berman and others at some point, and again, maybe back to Susan with the staff, on perhaps legislative fixes to this. But just about every answer was complexity of environmental studies, extensive environmental consultations, complexity and duration of environmental consultation. It goes on and on and on in all of these responses. And again, and I'm all for environmental review, but I'm just wondering on these existing corridors where there really isn't anything changing, it's still going to be a roadway. We're trying to improve safety, we're trying to improve operational efficiency. Common sense to me says, let's cut out some of the baloney that perhaps is slowing these projects up and making them cost more, which reduces the other projects that we could be prioritizing. So just like to see what we can do on that. It just gets a little frustrating that we're not delivering as much as we could be because of.
So I understand that frustration. I've been a member of a couple of those project delivery teams and seen these projects as they go forward. And actually, if we want more detailed response, I can defer to Jim Davis on this as the PM delivery. But oftentimes in these corridors where we have these projects, we have very old roadways that are 2 lanes and we're widening them, or we're having to straighten curves, and in that we're going into drainage areas, we're going over creeks. We may not actually own any right-of-way outside of what we maintain, prescriptive right-of-way. So the complexities, we're immediately into acquisition of property, and it adds a lot of cost, it adds a lot of time to do the analysis.
Well, I understand that, and I don't object to those. It was environmental on just about every answer to the projects that the staff submitted on their question. And it just brought up the issue that perhaps some of these things could be sped up a little
We
bit.
can come back and provide you more detail on those specific projects as well.
Again, I would just say I'd look to the commission staff at
Yeah.
some point. If there's a way that the commission, again, through our abilities, which is typically our report to the legislature at the
Right.
end of every year,
Right,
suggest a way to improve project delivery,
right.
that's what I'm getting at.
Commissioners,
Branson.
yeah, thank you. Commissioners, I think that's an excellent idea as we're having these conversations. I'm thinking that in our annual report where we've made recommendations with regard to CEQA, what we have not included is real-life examples. And I think today, between these 2 reports we've had so far today, are some real-life, major, serious examples. And so as staff will work with Caltrans, we'll identify what are the issues on the long lead, the environmental issues, and work with Caltrans with our engineers on what are the barriers that are occurring and how do we address those, and come up with some good recommendations for you all to consider.
And Commissioners, there's actually a bill right now in the legislature that addresses CEQA reform for housing, and maybe we can include the word transportation in there. I think Jim Gilmetti and Carl Gardina are very familiar with that one.
Thank you.
And just to add, in the department book item, we have the answers to the commission's questions. And on top of it, we have a change list that enumerates all of the changes that happened between when the document was presented and now. At the time when we'll be adopting the document, we'll be adopting it with all of these changes. So Mike, you're up.
Good morning, Commissioners. Mike Johnson on behalf of the department. So this is the first time under Senate Bill 486 that the Commission is actually in the position of finding this consistency between a transportation asset management plan and this 1,000 project portfolio that you have before you for a decision today. So I want to walk through how we do this and the things that we've put in place over the last couple of years. And through this, hopefully show and give you the confidence that the projects that you're faced with a choice on an adoption of the shop have a basis that is founded entirely consistent with the asset management plan. So I want to start with the formal definition. This is the AASHTO definition of transportation asset management, and I highlighted a couple of things. One is that the asset management plan is a strategic plan. It's not a tactical plan. The shop is a tactical plan, which is a partial execution of a 10-year transportation asset management plan. But the key here is to deliver agreed upon standard of service. And that standard of service is in the very most broad sense. It could be a performance level, but it can also be a condition level. With respect to the shop, these are the targets that the commission adopted over the last couple years. So you all have set the standard of service, and the department's plan is trying to achieve that standard of service. Yesterday, I presented the benchmarks, and that showed you the pathway at which we see going from where we are to where we need to be under the provisions of Senate Bill 1 and the targets that the commission adopted for asset management. So in the end, it's the plan that gives us this consistency. And then the benchmarks will allow us to prove that we're actually meeting that consistency. So the asset management plan provides the analysis, the framework to guide the shop investment decisions. The plan lays out what the needs are on a performance gap analysis approach and defines an investment plan. That investment plan is executed through the shop and the collection of projects that you have before you today. So how do we do this? At the highest level, we do a gap analysis that's completely unconstrained. This is required under Streets and Highway Code for the State Highway System Management Plan. There is a desire to understand what the total liability of the transportation system is, and that's why that provision's in place. In order to do this gap analysis, we look at the conditions of pavement, bridges, culverts, and many other things relative to the targets established by the commission, and we look at how big that gap is between the two. We utilize cost estimates to price that out, and that's how we come up with our unconstrained need. In California, the 2017 State Highway System Management Plan identified about $86 billion of transportation need overall. So that gets us to the statewide need assessment unconstrained. That's required by law. And then we have to constrain. So even with SB1, we have significantly more funds to do transportation work, but we don't have $86 billion over 10 years. So there's still a constraint that has to be applied. That constraint then leads to trade-offs between these things. With respect to the 4 core assets that we talked about yesterday, there's not a lot of trade-off from my perspective. We have a very specific target we have to hit, and there's a certain amount of investment that's required to hit that target. If we do not invest that level, then we run the risk of not meeting the target. So from the department's end, as soon as Senate Bill 1 passed and the targets were established, we have a very good estimate of what it's going to take to achieve that. In fact, I believe that that estimate was in part used to come up with the value that was included in SB 1. From all of this, we have an investment plan that comes out. And the investment plan does two things. It's statewide. It defines the funding plan for each of the assets and objectives that we have in the shop, and then the expected performance level that we'll get from that investment. So this is all high level. This is basically what the asset management plan does or did for us. So with the adoption of that plan, we move forward. But because of the timing of things, we knew that we had to get out in front of this, and the State Highway System Management Plan gave us that basis to build this shop consistent with the asset management plan you adopted yesterday. So how do we do that? It starts with performance. Everything is performance driven. So this is just an example of district level performance plans that my team develops and we provide to each of the 12 district directors. What these plans do is they show each district director how much inventory they have of these various things, what the distribution of condition is, how much work they've already committed to within prior shops, within prior shops, and then we look at the balance of what's needed, and that is occurs in this remaining performance area. And so we give the district directors a very specific number, like the one I'm highlighting. We need 759 lane miles of Class 1 pavement rehabilitated in a 10-year period. That's what we need. If that district does it and all other 11 districts do it, we will get enough project level accomplishments to hit the performance targets that have been established. On the far right in the box there, it shows that if we project out, well, where will we be in 2027 if we invest this level and we get this kind of performance done? And you can see that we've, in effect, hard-coded in the commission adopted targets there for Class 1 pavement. So we're backing in how much work is needed to get to these objectives. The districts then, the districts then take this information and they have to develop projects. This has never been done in Caltrans before. We have never had a set of projects behind a 10-year plan anytime in the past. We have one today. So we went to the districts, we said, here's the performance objective you have to hit, here's a budget constraint that you have to stay within, and we want your plans to be balanced from year to year so we don't have wild swings in delivery and in resource requirements in any one part of the state. So the districts do this, and they define these individual projects. And what I'm showing you on the screen here is one project in one district. This one happens to be in San Diego. This has all been implemented brand new in the last year and a half. For every project in the shop, there is a very detailed definition of what that project's going to do. And what you see on the screen here is an example. This project is primarily a pavement project, but you can see that we have transportation management systems, we've got some sign panel replacements, we've got overhead sign structure work going on, there's a little bit of bridge rail work going on. There's some way in motion information, there's a few ADA upgrades. This is what we're shooting for our project of the future. We want a comprehensive transportation project that's going to get into a corridor. We get economies of scale by packaging all this work together. We get economies in terms of not having to do multiple environmental documents, doing multiple traffic management plans. And we get in and we get out of that corridor. So in theory, this approach will be much less disruptive than in our prior model it was more silo-based, we might go into the same corridor 3 or 4 times to accomplish the same work. So these project-level definitions are made by each of the district project engineers. They're put into a database, and then my team rolls all this up across the district to say, okay, you've defined however many projects you've defined, and we're going to look by fiscal year to see what all this adds up to. And specifically, we're looking at whether they hit the performance targets we've established, and they've done it within the budget we provided. So we've been hyper-focused on the 4 core assets, and I completely agree with Bruce, having been through the benchmark analysis and seen it. If we don't remain focused on those 4 core assets, if we start diverting resources to other things, it will be very difficult for us to achieve the commitments we've made in SB1. So from the department standpoint, we are holding the line very, very tight on this investment in these core asset areas. So we can look at this proposed project portfolio summary, which is what we call the performance objective report here. And we can work with the districts, and we got 12 of these submitted. They're submitted by the district director to the chief deputy of Caltrans. They're reviewed by myself and my team. I think in this first go-around, it was kind of a learning curve. I think all 12 of them were sent back, revisions were made, they came back, and we got ourselves in a position where going forward, our projects are lined up to get us where we need to go. And this is really important because ultimately in the shop, we can only program what we have planning documents for. So it's very important that we're planning the right work so that when we have the completed planning work, we can program the right work. So we take these constrained district project portfolios, we aggregate them, we review them statewide for performance and fiscal balance. Everything checks out, we have a draft shop. Now there's multiple iterations that went on this first go around. I expect that'll happen in the future. This is done primarily by my team. Once we have this project portfolio that came in from the district, we've checked it, we pass it over to programming, and that actually leads to a draft shop. It goes out for public comment and we move forward. This process married up or paired up with the benchmarks are the 2 things that we feel give us the tools to make sure that we're going in the right place and we're going to get where we need to go by the time frame that we have to get there. So it's the process that gives us this confidence that we're consistent. So with that, I'm here. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions, or we can turn it back over to Bruce if we want to talk other shop questions.
Commissioner Von Kleinenberg?
Thank you, Mike, again for all your efforts on this. I know we've gone a long ways from where things used to be, and that's a lot of your efforts. So we had a Northern California hearing on this. For those watching today, you can go back and look at that. We had about an hour of back and forth of questions. I would just highlight some of the things that we talked about at that hearing was the consistency with the Transportation Asset Management Plan, which this commission has looked at now at 3 different meetings in some various form or another. We talked about the concept that we are still in some areas of the state having to go back and find culverts and drainage that may have been put in almost 100 years ago on some roads, and the thought is that at some point in this process, we might need to digitize all of the drainage and culvert assets, as in some of our areas of the state, we have limited knowledge there in some cases. We talked about harmonizing the shop with the $100 million efficiency plans and goals that Caltrans has. We talked about environmental streamlining, and we had that discussion both at the project delivery hearing in Sacramento, but also at the hearing in June. And we also talked about how when you look at the overall shop, and I think this is for everyone in the room, because it's an asset management-based plan, it means that sometimes there'll be a lot of money spent in Del Norte or Trinity County because those assets need to be brought into good or fair condition. And sometimes people will think, well, why are they getting so much money to repair those assets? It's because those assets need to be repaired. It's not a plan based upon population or even road miles. It's based upon the asset. So those are kind of a very high line, hopefully summarizing an hour's worth of questions and conversation we had at the hearing. And I want to just say thank you to you and Bruce for addressing those issues. And some of these are going to be ongoing. Obviously, the issue of digitizing underground assets, that's going to be a long, as we talked about back then, that's going to be a long process. But thank you again, and I'm prepared to support the shop when it comes up for a vote today.
Commissioner Alvarado?
And I just want to say thank you too, and a job well done. This has really started, I was a little bit concerned when we first started going down this road, but it's pretty much all come together, and want to compliment you and your staff and for putting this thing together.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other comments? So I'll add my congratulations and thank you all for the hard work. I think the most telling statement for me was when you said before we didn't really have a list, and now we have a list. So I think that gives all of us, we realize that it is a strategic plan, and we'll work on that. I think just thinking back to yesterday and the Fair and Piers analysis of vehicle miles traveled, the delta there, just to me causes me some angst in terms of this unknown future for all of us. So I think, we're on our pace and we have our schedule, but I think for all of us to truly understand how quickly things may change right before our eyes is going to be so very important for us to be able to say, we need to relook. And then I think to put it into something that I could analogy here, if we're going to be having a trilogy, this organization feels to me like if we're going to go in and redo the living room, we're going to think about putting the carpeting in last and not putting that in first and having the electricians come in with their equipment. So I think it's you guys have put a lot of work into this, and I'm hoping that Vince, there was some financial award with that certification. So he didn't mention that, but
I haven't
that
seen the
would be
check yet.
It's in the mail.
Pardon me? Okay. So we do have some public comments on this. So since this is the hearing, I have Bill Sankey, council member, City of Coronado.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners, and staff, and especially your email team. Really appreciate your help. I want to, for the record, note our bridge is not on your list. Okay, thank you very much. And commend District 11 Director, when she was District 11 Director, Lori Berman, for taking good care of our bridge, and congratulations on your new position. Let's see, the City of Coronado respectfully requests the California Transportation Commission allocate funds to improve safety on the San Diego Coronado Bay Bridge. The bridge carries about 90,000 vehicle trips a day on a given weekday. It's a critical component of the San Diego transportation system linking City to Coronado, which attracts between 2 and 3 million visitors a year to our island, and it also hosts 3 major federal military installations. That link is fragile. During a recent morning commute, an explosives threat at the gate to Naval Base North Island stopped traffic through town, over the bridge, and all the way back to Interstate 5. That's almost a 4-mile backup. And it was impossible for the emergency EOD folks who were on the wrong side of the bridge to get to the gate to solve the problem, and it made the closure of the base gate take several hours longer than it had to. It's a fragile link. Across the span, there are different challenges, different safety challenges. I handed out, the clerk was kind enough to hand out the incident report from the San Diego Union Tribune on a pickup truck that came over the rail on a bridge approach and sadly, on a weekend event, landed in a park and killed 4 innocent people attending a picnic. It was a tragic accident, and one that pointed out to many people safety deficiencies on the Coronado Bridge. That's on the approach ramp area. At the midspan area of the bridge, in the 50 years the bridge has been open, there's been thousands of incidents that have disrupted the operational efficiency of the bridge and caused safety problems across the vehicle and pedestrian spectrum. My point is the San Diego Bridge, which is a lifeline to Coronado, has safety problems, and you guys have the opportunity to fix it. A third problem is our approach where the bridge highway speeds turn into a residential neighborhood, and that kind of goes back to the place where the bridge was designed to enter Coronado, which happens to go from the 50-mile-an-hour speed limit to a 25 or 30-mile-an-hour residential zone, and we could use some safety improvements in that area as well. Commissioners, I urgently ask you to do something with your SHOP funding that improves safety on the Coronado Bridge. This is, for many members of our community, a very emotional issue, and I understand your reticence to act on an emotional problem. But for us, it's a safety issue, it's an operational issue, and I'm new at this, but I read SHOPP, and the S is safety and the O is operations, and you've got a chance to help our community, so please do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Blair King, City Manager, City of Coronado.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. I just want to point out 3 areas that I think that our request align with the SHOP program goals. Those 3 areas are bridge preservation, bridge rail replacement upgrades, mobility operation improvements, and collision reduction. In terms of the bridge preservation, bridge rail project, this is a 50-year-old bridge. There were 34-inch high barriers installed. They were designed that way to be low enough to allow for an unobstructed view from the bridge. However, since the bridge opening, per Caltrans, 5 vehicles have driven off the bridge, the most recent being 2016, which resulted in 4 deaths. The bridge rails are inadequate and they're too low. The second is mobility operation improvements, which also is a SHOP program goal, just mentioned to you previously. We have tracked the number of bridge closures. They are quite frequent. There are only 2 ways in and out. It takes about 90,000 vehicles. The average closure over the last 3 years has lasted 1 hour. The longest closure is 6 hours. Those type of backups produce backups on Interstate 5 and also the alternative route. Typically, if there is a long closure on the Coronado Bridge, there is a corresponding sympathetic accident on State Route 75. So a closure on the Coronado Bridge will result in an accident on State Route 75, which is the alternative to the Coronado Bridge. The third is in terms of collision reduction and severity. There are no shoulders on the bridge. There's no safety zones for first responders, pedestrians, broken down vehicles, which causes the bridge then to be closed down in both directions. Again, what I mentioned is highway speeds on I-5 due to backups on the bridge, which typically last 1 hour at least in length and can last up to 6 hours, causes vehicles at a high rate of speed to slow to zero within a short period of time. We think that our requests are consistent with the SHOP program goals and would like your consideration. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any other discussion on this item? If not, I'm going to ask that we close that hearing. And we move to item 76. Stephen?
Yes, Commissioners. Item 76 is the actual adoption of the 2018 SHOP. What I want to point out to you is this 2018 SHOP has increased. It's weighing in at about $18 billion. The previous SHOP was at about 10. The increase of $8 billion is due to SB1. People talk about SB1 and they kind of forget that the lion's share of the SB1 monies is actually going to the SHOP. So I just wanted to remind you of that. As we had the hearing and the presentations, the department has laid out the case that the SHOP 2018 SHOP is consistent with the asset management plan. So staff would recommend that you find the SHOP to be consistent and that you adopt the 2018 SHOP. I also want to point out that in the revision list, last chance grade is addressed, and we are increasing the programming for the environmental piece of last chance grade from $5 million to $10 million. with that, staff recommends that you approve the 2018 shop.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, a second by Commissioner Madaffer. I think Commissioner Alvarado, did you
No,
have
just
yours on? Okay,
Make the motion to approve.
okay.
I would just echo for people, I think once we get beyond November, we need to look at this as more of a river than a pond of funding. It's ongoing. And so I think the concerns, if you have, need to share those with Caltrans. Caltrans will put those in, have to bring those forward, though, in the asset management strategic way of spending. So I think that's the path forward for those who feel like a need is unmet.
And just to remind the commission, the shop is a 2-year document. Every 2 years, we do a total reexamination of the shop, and every commission meeting will probably be entertaining amendments to the shop. This is a flexible document.
Commissioner Madaffer?
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to Stephen, to Rick, to Bruce, doing an outstanding job, big changes. Thanks to the folks from Coronado pointing out the issues there, and look forward to seeing this continue to evolve as we move forward.
And I want to give Bruce a shout out. He paid attention last week at CalCog, and the trilogy was something that we could really understand. So good job, and we'll be looking for that movie to be made of your good work. So thank you.
Shout out to Donna Berry, who's actually the author of the shop. Donna, can you please stand?
Okay.
She is the brilliant person who pulled this together.
All right. Well, we ought to bring her up to the front row, not let her hide in the back. So, okay, we have a motion on the floor. I know.
So you're the front man, huh?
Oh, we could go with some comments here, but we better take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining for the record? So thank you all. We've all come a long way together, and I think we can stand proud. So thank you. Yeah, yeah. Okay, now we're going to go back to, what number are we going to, Sis?
64.
66? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. We're gonna
64.
jump around just a little bit. We have the representative from the city of Barstow. I realize that we've already had a lengthy discussion about our bridges that are not taken care of yet, but out of respect to one of our colleagues who has driven more than 2 hours, I'm sure, to get here, I'd like to call forward Domingo Gonzalez from the city of Barstow.
Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners. I apologize for being delayed. There was a couple accidents on my way here, kind of delayed my travels here. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to say where we're at on our bridge projects. In 2012, I stood before you guys and you asked me the same question: where are you guys at in the bridges? Since then, the city council, the city manager, and staff has taken a priority on these projects. One of our bridges, the First Avenue Bridge over BNSF, I'm glad to announce that we are in the PS&E phase of the project and doing right-of-way at the same time. We're looking at a construction date of spring of 2019 if all of the right-of-way goes as we plan. The other bridge that we have is First Avenue Bridge over Mojave River. We are in the PAED phase of this bridge. We've been moving forward on that. We're looking forward to having this bridge go to construction in 2020. And then our final bridge was Yucca Avenue Bridge. It's a seismic retrofit. Working through our problems with Caltrans, we were glad to receive our authorization in 2017. We are in the process of sending out an RFP next week to get a consultant on base to look at what needs to be done. And we're looking at a construction date of 2020 for that project also. So in summarizing everything, the city of Barstow appreciates all the efforts that Caltrans has given us. It's a new process for any little agencies to get on board on. There's a lot of learning curves that we have to go through, a lot of environmental learning curves that has impact our projects. But at this point, we are moving forward with all our bridges, and we hope to get these constructed and give our community nice, safe bridges that they can travel on.
Could you tell me, on your 3 bridges, when do you expect the design to be finished?
Like I said, for the First Street Bridge over BNSF, we plan to have the design completed and go to construction in 2019.
Okay, but that's start of construction. You don't have the dates for when you finish design?
No, I can get that for you, though.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I got a little sidebar going over here, and I'll tell you the gist of what I think it might be. 2012 was 6 years ago, and if you happen to have dialed in and listened to this item while you were driving, there's lots of frustration about the length of time. So I guess on the good news side is you're still here, and we're still working with the same person, but we need to understand better what really took 6 years to get us from where we were in 2012 to where we are here. And so it's this body's intention to do anything we can to shorten those, because we're all going to be long a tooth by the time some of these bridges get done, and that's not a comfort place that we want to be in. So did I catch the gist? I don't know, Commissioner Alvarado or Paul, if you want to add any more, but thank you for making the drive. We do appreciate that. But we'd like to see, 6 years is an awful long time. We need to see some action.
Yes, I agree with you. We did have some problems with the environmental. To get past the environmental, it took 22 months. That was on one of our bridges. So we are moving forward. Caltrans is helping with all our issues. But that was one of our biggest delays in moving forward with the First Avenue Bridge over BNSF.
Okay, well, we're trying to peel back the onion here, I think, and really understand what we put labels on things, and then it just, so let's really try to understand if some of our agency partners, we're not asking folks to compromise what they do, but we need to make sure that we don't have items sitting in someone's inbox waiting in another queue line and another queue line and another queue line. So, Stephen, you can I think you'll probably continue to be our point person to help us understand if there's something we need to do, trying to get part of a legislative fix when we're going back into the same footprint, or we want to do what we can. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to move on to item 66. Stephen.
Yes, Commissioners, item 66 is a request for additional funds for the major damage restoration reservation. The adopted 2016 SHOP had a reservation of $140 million for this fiscal year. Back in December of 2017, the Commission increased that reservation by $200 million. The department has already committed over $403 million to major damage restoration and emergency project by February of this year. The department is now asking for an additional $210 million. Staff recommends that you approve this additional supplemental to the damage restoration reservation.
We have a motion by Commissioner Alvarado, a second by Commissioner Dunn. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Motion carries. Item 67, Stephen.
Yes, Commissioners. Item 67 is the programming of the Presidio Trust's landscape work. If you will recall, back in August of 2016, the Commission relieved the Golden Link Partners, or Golden Link concessionaire, the developer of the project, from responsibility for the Presidio Park landscaping, and created that as a separate standalone project. The department has been negotiating with the Presidio for a long time. They have actually come to terms on money back in September, October of last year. Their biggest stumbling block was property rights. Now they have come to an agreement that does lay out the property rights. For a initial $5 million payment, the trust will turn over a deed that lays out easements where the department can now operate on the right-of-way through the Presidio Trust. Previously, they were operating on the right of entry. Also, since this is going to be a brand-new programming action, the commission would be relieving San Francisco of its obligations as far as its STIP shares go for this programming. San Francisco is going to be contributing to this project $2 million. MTC is going to be contributing $15 million, and the state is going to be contributing $37 million. There is a agreement now in place between the trust and the department, as I said previously. It looks like everything is in place. There is some risk, as always. There are risks. It could very well wind up that in the end the agreement could blow up, but as long as the exchange of the deed with the easement and the $5 million happen, that does not impinge on that piece. So staff would be recommending that you program this Presidio Trust landscaping project into the P3 program.
We have a motion by Commissioner Alvarado, a second by Commissioner Dunn. Is there any discussion? So just clarification, Stephen, you're saying that the easement, the $5 million payment, the easement cannot be revoked if the rest of the deal
Correct.
falls apart. Thank you.
That's something that will be happening within the next couple of days. The easement
Okay.
piece.
Okay. Call for the vote. All in favor? Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining for the record? I believe that records as no abstentions, but motion carries. Thank you, Stephen. Okay, item 68.
We still have 67. Oh, 68, I'm sorry. 68 is the actual allocation of the state's $37 million towards this programming that we just did. Staff recommend that you allocate $37 million for the trust's landscaping work.
We have a motion by Commissioner Gardino, second by Commissioner Tavaloni. Any discussion? Bijan, did you want to come say something? No. Just kidding you. You are going to retire, right? I know. I had to do that, Bijan, sorry. Okay, hearing no further discussion, there's a motion on the floor. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Let that be recorded. The motion passed with no abstentions. Thank you. Item 69.
Yes, Commissioners. Item 69 is a request of supplemental funds for the Gerald Desmond Bridge. The department is requesting $19.2 million for its oversight activities on this bridge. Just to remind you, the bridge originally was programmed as a $1 billion project. In the past, it has gone up to $1.5 billion. When it was at $1 billion, the state's contribution to that bridge was $500 million, split $470 million for the port, because Port is the owner of this bridge, and the port has a design builder who's actually building this bridge. And then there was $30 million for the department's oversight activities, because once this bridge is built, the bridge will be turned over to the department and will become state responsibility. At the time when we were increasing the funding, the commission gave the port an additional $33 million and the department $15 million for oversight activities. At that time, the department requested $24 million, but $9 million was for risk. At that time, the commission said, please try to mitigate the risk. We're not going to allocate you the risk monies at this time. If the risk materializes, you would need to come back. Well, the department is back. Risk has materialized. The port and the design builder have changed schedule on this project. This project was supposed to have been completed by December of this year. Now it's looking like February of 2020, and there's a big question mark on that one too. So the department needs more funds to engage in its oversight activities. We are now approaching one of the most critical pieces of this bridge work, which is the installation of the deck and the cable stays. This work has to be done correctly, otherwise we're going to be living with a maintenance nightmare for the rest of the life of this bridge. So staff recommends that you approve this supplemental allocation of $19.2 million so the department can finish out its oversight activities on this bridge.
We have a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, a second by Commissioner Madaffer. Is there any discussion on this item? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Okay. We're doing a lot of thinking this morning. That's good. Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Item 70.
Yes, Commissioners, items 70, 71, and 72 are supplemental requests to award construction contracts. All of these three items, the main issue with them is they are running higher than the engineer's estimate. Most of these issues relate to the hot market that we are now engaged in as far as construction activities go. The department and commission staff have examined these projects and have come to the conclusion that if we were to re-advertise these projects, we would not get any better bids. We probably would get even higher bids. Staff recommends that you approve the supplemental funds for items 70, 71, and 72.
We have a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, a second by Commissioner Dunn.
Just a quick comment.
Yes.
So, specifically on item 70, 63% over the original allocated amount. Can we just get a brief explanation as to why that happened?
Yes, they had 4 bidders on that project. The low bidder was like 30% over, asked to be disqualified because he had mathematical errors in his bid. It turned out true, so he was disqualified. The next 3 bidders, they all were within a very narrow range of that 60% to 80%. Okay. This project is a very remote location, and they don't have any local contractors, so all the contractors and subs are coming from the Bay Area.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Gilmetti.
Thank you. Just a couple of observations. With regard to the roadside safety projects, if we could have Caltrans reinitiate contacts with the federal government to see if we can privatize these. I understand that the trucking industry might be one of the objections, but maybe we can work out a compromise, because we're spending a boatload of money. When you look at examples in Europe where they have roadside rests that are all privatized, they have restaurants, they have gas stations, et cetera. But it seems to me one little lobby shouldn't be able to stop us from being able to privatize areas that are roadside rests. My other comment had to do with item 72, and this is just curiosity. Rubberized asphalt, when I first got on the commission, we were told would cost about a third more, but would last a third longer. I'm not sure whether it's still costing us a third more. I'd like to know, but I'd also like to know if it's really lasting longer. In areas in the Bay Area, I've seen it unravel in less time. So if you guys could take a look at that, I'd appreciate it, Laurie.
Yeah, we have a representative from District 5 who can address the rubberized asphalt issue.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Richard Rosales, Acting District Director for San Luis Obispo, District 5. The department's been using crumb rubberized hot mix asphalt since 2002. Over that time, we've worked with the industry, and they've gotten better in terms of their mix design. We're mandated by law to use 35% of that material in our what we lay down for asphalt. In this particular project, the rubberized asphalt is actually cheaper than the hot mix asphalt. So in terms of how we use this, we use the rubberized asphalt mix as an overlay because of its flexibility. It reduces reflective cracking from the underlying material, and it does prolong the life of the pavement.
Can you give me an approximation? How much life are we extending this by?
Unfortunately, I don't have that information, but I know for sort of 1-inch hot mix regular asphalt, it's about 8 years. I believe this is going to be longer than that. What we're laying down here is 2/10. We hadn't been back at this location since 2004. We did use a rubberized chip seal, and so that's 14 years since we've been at this location.
So it's 2/10 over regular asphalt?
2/10 over, yeah, the regular asphalt is out there.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Okay, this is action items, right? So
Action items for 3 items.
for 3 items. So that was 70, 71, and 72.
Correct.
We have a motion?
We have a motion.
Oh, we already did a motion. Okay, good. Then all we need is a vote. So all in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? We're good to go.
Anybody
73,
thinking
please.
about abstaining?
73.
Yes, Commissioners. Item 73 is a supplemental to complete construction. This project was a emergency project, and as the emergency project was being dealt with, the department also started the restoration project. The original allotment for this project was $3 million. The department has already spent $2 million. The contractor is still submitting his billings. The department needs another $1.4 million to satisfy the contractor's billings. Staff recommends that you approve the supplemental allocation.
We have a motion by Commissioner Gardino, a second by Commissioner Tavaloni. Is there any discussion on this item? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Motion carries. Item 74, Teresa.
Commissioners, item 74 is an information item. Bruce DeTerra from Caltrans will provide you a brief overview on the changes for the CMAQ apportionment formula program. Just for a quick reference, the CMAQ program, the commission approves the funding through the annual lump sum allocation, the federal lump sum allocation. The last federal fiscal year, CMAQ represented $472 million, and that's the portion for this program. And Bruce DeTerra is here for that.
Thank you very much, Teresa.
Excuse me, Bruce, did you write this?
Yes, I actually did write the book item. I have the original version, which is like, I don't know. So I didn't think it told a good story. So this is a fairly complex issue that I'm going to walk through a little more slowly than I did the shop, because this is new to pretty much everyone. This is the first time this has happened, and it's not the last time, because it'll happen again with a few of the agencies. But this is a major change in the way CMAQ funds are distributed, and it's initiated due to federal action, not state action. So I'm going to go through this really quickly. So what's happening, and I received a letter from US EPA yesterday clarifying that this is indeed taking effect, and it's taking effect on June 1st of this year. Calendar year, not the federal fiscal year. So that this change that's happening starts there. So California is divided up into a series of federally designated air basins, and a number of them are non-attainment for NOx, ozone precursor, which is the things that make up NOx within the atmosphere. And then also secondary to that, areas that have that ozone issue may also then have conformity issues with carbon monoxide and particulate matters. But it is the NOx that triggers this, that makes them eligible for CMAQ funding. And CMAQ funding is very important to our partner agencies. because it's fairly flexible. They can do a variety of kinds of projects. And I've been part of some of the teams at local agencies within the regions that discuss and score things with the air districts on which projects get to go forward. So it's a very thoughtful process, and it's very effective to be able to do a variety of projects that address air quality issues. Our regional partners are aware that this is coming up. We have an office within the programming division that addresses the FTIP and works with all of our regional partners on CMAQ issues and other federal programming issues. For this particular issue, there's no action being asked of the commission. It's information for you. That lump sum allocation is the action, but then now how that money is split out is driven by a formula basis. So CMAQ has started in 1992, again, for ozone and then carbon monoxide. Federal Highways provides the CMAQ funding to all the states that qualify for this. And qualifying for it is not a good thing, even though you're getting that money. It means you've got serious air quality issues that are a threat to health. So the money that we receive, this $470 million, needs to be invested in projects that actually address transportation-related emissions. So you can't go and use this funds to go and address factories and other things. It's transportation improvements that address air quality issues. So the department doesn't retain any of this funding for ourselves. All of the CMAQ funding is distributed to eligible regional agencies that have air basins within them. So some of our regional agencies have multiple air basins, and some air basins may include more than one regional agency for some of the very large ones. And in particular, the South Coast Air Basin in Los Angeles is one that's at issue here today. And they unfortunately have the acronym of SCAB. So within the SCAG region, the South Coast Air Basin is referred to as SCAB. And I corrected the spelling of my staff multiple times to keep crossing out the SCAB and write SCAG, SCAG, SCAG. So I have been corrected. So if you see that somewhere, it's not a typographical error.
SCAG,
It actually is. So no offense to Southern California, but that air quality has been so bad that it's like, formed a scab on that. Okay, that was my one joke that my staff said I could do. I couldn't resist it. So I haven't. Yeah. As of yesterday, when I received the letter from US EPA, there's a change on this slide, and I didn't have the opportunity to change it, and it was already in your packet. So it is not this non-attainment or this attainment versus non-attainment status doesn't take effect on June 30th. It's June 1st of this calendar year. So what's important is that a number of these agencies that California has have been identified as non-attainment back in 1992 for the carbon monoxide. And they, most of them achieved attainment, and then they became maintenance areas. But as maintenance areas, they continued to receive funding for a period of time until June 1st of this year, and they now are officially attainment areas. So for the carbon monoxide portion of that $470 million, they're no longer eligible. For that money that they were receiving is now going to be redistributed to other agencies that either are still in a maintenance status or have never been non-attainment for carbon monoxide, that they achieved that. They never were non-attainment, so they get a share of that money that was distributed. So there's a redistribution of the money, and you do have the summary sheet of how it's affecting all the regions. Again, this is not a surprise to the regions. It may be a surprise to some of their leadership that this has happened to them, but their programming staff have been aware of it for quite a while. But the $470 million that Vince so graciously gives us, we still are receiving as a state. We're still giving all of that money to the regional agencies based on a formula basis that's set in state law, but it just shifts that carbon monoxide portion. The ozone portion doesn't change. So the South Coast Air Basin, if you'll look at your sheet there, it's roughly in the middle where it's SCAG region. And then you can see the acronym SCAB on there for Riverside, Orange, LA. They are getting a significant funding increase as compared to other agencies. And you'll see that the MTC area, Fresno, and the SACOG region are getting relatively large reductions just for the carbon monoxide. For the ozone, they stay the same. So we have this table we've distributed, and so now the agencies have this in time to do their fiscal planning for the coming state fiscal year. Again, there's no action required of you, but in case you have questions about this, this will not happen again on this scale unless our regions all start achieving the ozone, or if the federal government changes the CMAQ program, which they have the ability to do. Let's see, where am I? I think I'm very close to the end. Here is the map of the area regions that are affected by these changes. So the stars represent those air basins that are carbon monoxide maintenance areas. So the only one that's continuing as a maintenance area is this region in Southern California with the 2 stars there. The rest of them are now going to be classified as attainment. So these are the regions that are having the redistribution of the funding. And I realize it's a somewhat complicated map. We did work on simplifying it for the various different kinds of air quality. So all of these areas that are on this map that are highlighted with the blue border are ozone non-attainment, and then the others with carbon monoxide are the subset that have that red star. And so all but the South Coast Air Basin, essentially from the red star areas, are giving up their revenue, not voluntarily giving it up, but the formula forces this redistribution. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions and hopefully I can respond to them, because it is fairly a complex issue driven by a US EPA policy.
Do we have any questions? Given the non-attainment challenges, it doesn't seem like a lot of money to help us achieve our goals. So it started in 92, we've been getting the same amount since 92?
It has changed. I can I can get that actual change over time of how much we've received as a state.
Well, no, I mean, my
Okay.
point is it's not very much money to help us get into attainment. So I guess the question I have, so in this case, a star isn't necessarily a good thing.
No. Actually, being on this map in any regard other than the area that has no coloration on it is not a good thing. That means you have air quality issues that are of threat to the health of your citizens. So, but the carbon monoxide piece of that is no longer a threat to these folks in that area. That they've met federal attainment levels. now.
Okay, well, as we all try to achieve our emission reduction goals, I think this is an area that really, it's hard for all of us because there's big price tags, and not to look a
Yeah.
gift horse in the mouth, but 470 million is not.
And it is per year, the 470
Yeah.
million.
Yeah, and with our geography and also the nation's gateways, we're moving a lot of the nation's freight through our ports and our corridors here, and the transload center of the U.S. is in our inland empire. So I think it's a challenge for all of us. So Vince is still working next week. We did hear they've agreed on an ombudsman bill, so maybe Vince will be back. But I think it's an area, our air district has, gone to EPA and said, hey, you all need to help more. But so far it seems like we're having to do a lot of heavy lifting on our own. So thank you, Bruce.
You're quite welcome.
Okay, this was not an action item, information item, so we can move on now to item 75.
Thank you. Commissioners, item 75 is an action item. It requests two things. One is to add 29 new projects into the 2016 SHOP and revise 46 currently programmed SHOP projects. On the 29 new projects, 24 of them are emergency response projects, meaning they were in response to flood or fire or cleanup after a disaster. 4 are safety projects, and 1 is an advancement of a project that was proposed in a future year in the 2018 SHOP. The revision to the 46 currently programmed projects are part of the normal process to update those projects as we go into the new programming cycle. Commission staff has reviewed both the new projects and each individual project change and recommends commission approval.
Okay, so we had a motion by Commissioner von Konynenberg, and this, oh, it was Gilmetti? I'm sorry. Commissioner Gilmetti. And the second was over here, I think it was, they're pointing at each other. Commissioner Gardino, tie, yeah. So, okay, so any further discussion? I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Motion carries. Now we have done 76. We will go to item 77.
Commissioners, item 77 is an action item requesting the allocation of $111,362,000 for 13 projects from the 2016 shop that are now delivered and ready to begin construction. Commission staff has reviewed the projects for consistency with the programming and their readiness and recommends commission approval.
Okay, a motion by Commissioner Dunn, a second by Commissioner Tavaloni. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Motion carries. Item 78. Rick?
Commissioners, item 78 is an action item requesting allocation of $30,960,000 for one project on Route 58 in Kern County. Commission staff has reviewed the project for consistency with the programming in the shop and recommends your approval.
We have a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, a second by Commissioner Madaffer. Is there any discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor? Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Motion carries. Item 79.
Commissioners, item 79 is an action item requesting the allocation of $226,900,000 for 241 pre-construction support phases for projects in the shop. Commission staff has reviewed the projects for consistency with the programming and recommends your approval.
We have a motion by Commissioner Alvarado, a second by Commissioner Dunn. We have a question by Commissioner
Well,
Konynenberg.
Rick, I would just, if you could, just keep asking for better descriptions on these as we discussed. I asked you some questions about some of these different items. And I think the response was back is, well, if you had a better description, you'd understand why it's this amount.
Yes.
So could we work on getting a better description so that we understand why, a guardrail,
Yes.
engineering a guardrail costs $900,000?
Yes, sir.
That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
And on that, if I just may, in looking at that, I had a similar question because they were such perfectly round numbers in so many cases. If they don't spend it all, does it come back in?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll call for the vote. All in favor? Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Motion carries. Now we're going to go to item 86.
Commissioners, item 86 is, in the book, is a Caltrans information item on the status of the active transportation program, semi-annual progress reports by local agencies. However, Commission staff has prepared a cover book item that you should have as a pink that is an action item. Commissioners, as specified in the Active Transportation Program guidelines, implementing agencies are responsible for reporting on their projects. Implementing agencies must submit semi-annual reports on the activities and progress made toward implementation of the project and a final delivery report within 1 year of the project becoming operable that includes performance outcomes. These reports are submitted to Caltrans. Caltrans then provides a summary report to the Commission, and the first one of these is planned to be presented at the May Commission meeting. According to Caltrans records, however, the reporting percentage has been very low. These reports are critical for Commission staff and others to assess that we are achieving the expected benefits from the projects and the overall ATP program. The Caltrans book item provides a list of agencies who are behind on their progress reports. I want to note, however, that some agencies have reported to staff that they are up to date on their reports, so the list may have some inaccuracies and maybe there's some lag time in the reports coming in. To provide motivation for agencies to submit their reports in a timely manner, staff recommends including the following penalties and consequences for failure to submit reports into the draft 2019 Active Transportation Program guidelines. The possible consequences would be that Caltrans may withhold an appropriate percentage of project funds. It may be recommended that further allocation of program funds be withheld, and an agency that fails to submit the required reports could be determined ineligible for future project programming. While it is disappointing that we have some ATP reporting issues, this has come up in an opportune time as we will be programming many SB1 projects very soon, that they will also have reporting requirements. So now that this has been brought up, we can get ahead of this issue now. We had a very good discussion on this at the RTPA meeting, and all of the regional agencies are very willing to help their local agencies get their reports in on time. We also had heard some good ideas on how we can make it easier for the agencies to report. I've also heard from CSAC and the League, and they've offered to work with their members on project reporting. So I can take any questions, and Ray Zhang is here from Caltrans, and he can respond to, and again, it is an action item.
Okay, we have a question by Commissioner von Kononenberg.
Ray, are you available for questions?
Yes.
All right, thanks. So staff mentioned that the implementing agency should be submitting two different types of reports, the semi-annual report and the project completion report, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we're only getting the semi-annual progress reports. Is there a similar list of people who haven't turned in the project completion report, or is the compliance with that is egregious as what we're seeing here?
So the semi-annual report, this agency is supposed to submit them on a regular basis. And the final report is, only submitted when the project is completed. So the program just started about 3 or 4 years ago. So we don't have that many agencies that have, completed their ATP projects. So the information on the submission of the final report, we're still not, we don't still have all the complete information. So we did not put that list forward as far as the.
Okay, so how many, so if we were to have a list, how many would we see that are deficient in submitting their project completion report?
I would say probably a few dozen, so.
6 dozen?
A few dozen. I do not have that information
Okay,
with me.
maybe you could let our staff know that, please, ASAP?
Yeah,
Okay,
sure.
second thing, given that a lot of these, we're now into a lot of agencies that are very small. How can we make it easier for them to comply with these reporting requirements? Is there some type of, yesterday we heard complaints that there wasn't a good online tool, something like that. Have you looked into all the steps you could be taking to make it easier for these agencies to submit the reports?
Yeah, so that is something we are looking at, and so along with the regional agencies and also the, like Lori mentioned, the league and then CSAC, we're all willing to help with the local agencies submitting the report. We are looking at creating some kind of online reporting, so because now with SB1 program, other projects, they all have reporting requirements they
Okay.
need to meet.
Is there some form of an electronic tickler that would be sent out to remind people, hey, your report is due 30 days from now?
Yeah,
Something
that's
like
definitely
that?
something we can do.
Because this is very new to a lot of very small municipalities. So
It is.
what we can do to help them. And then, Lori, getting back to your, this question of accountability, I kind of go back as I was hearing different people talk yesterday, going back to the system that I'm familiar with as having a 7-year-old, the warning, detention, or demerit, detention, expulsion system of punishment that kind of gives people time to correct their behavior. What we don't want, we want people to be doing these projects, but on the other hand, we want them to be accountable. So we got to help them through this process.
Paul, I think they use green card, yellow card, and red card, or happy face.
My son's horrible at soccer, so I left that part of it behind.
Well, all joking aside, this list is way, way too long. So I think we need to figure out if it's just they already have the money and they don't need to
Can-
finish all
one
their.
last thing. So when you say you're working on an online reporting tool and an electronic checker, when will you have that available?
I do not have an estimate for that yet, because they have.
Okay, well, you understand they're having to comply with this, and we're
Yes.
pumping this
So-
program pretty hard. So
Yeah,
at some
so
point, we
right
got to get
now,
on this.
Right now, we're receiving the PDF form submission. So they can always submit it that, and so the online reporting will just
Okay.
make it easy.
Okay.
Well, and I think, we need to really figure out what's going on and why, and it may not be one size fits all, or, there might be something that we can discover from all of this, but, we've got a lot of partners, and I see Patricia Chin back there, and she's going to die when I ask her this, but Metro's on there a couple of times, so I don't know, Patricia, if you have some insight where you could share with us anything you've learned?
I appreciate your asking, because we did check in with our coworker who is responsible for submitting those reports, and she did indicate that we have 4 projects that are, do need to submit reports, and 2 were received, and 2 were sent in, but don't seem to have made it to where they were recognized. So
Okay, so
we're
maybe,
showing as batting 50, but we believe we're batting 100.
okay, well, and it may be some timing, or folks, first time through, you're not as efficient, but let's all work together and make sure this list cannot stay
I
4
think-
pages in a size 6 font, which none of us can read anymore, but, yeah.
I think timing is the right word. I think the list has come out, and there's a lot of questions and issues about how could it be that it looks that bad, and some time for us to look through it and work on it, and you mentioned that the regions are very willing and eager to work on it. I think some time would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, well, let's get into it and solve this issue. So, Director Branson, yeah.
I guess a question really for Caltrans, and really it's more of a request, to work with our staff on what your process is for how you notify the agencies when they are delinquent in reporting, and how we can work together in ensuring that commission staff is aware of those requests that you've already made. This came as a surprise to us, and I think it did of our partner agencies. And so just looking forward to working with you on a new process so that we're all very much aware of the timelines. And we know the semi-annual, but where there's been delinquency and there's been proper notification to the agencies before we would bring something forward at a commission meeting, let's try to resolve it before that point in time.
We will, and I think by the May meeting, the report will be in a much better form.
Hopefully it's got 0 on it. Zero
Let's hope so.
agencies. That'll be the goal. Thank you, Ray.
Commissioner Dunn?
Yeah, and I want to echo that, Susan, thank you, because I think that we got to let the process and the system work first before we start looking at sanctions for people. There's a number of, what I'm hearing from districts is a number of their projects, they did submit reports, but they just weren't in on the system. So let's just make sure we've got all that, the kinks issued before we start issuing unsmiley faces. Okay.
I think that means we have yellow cards. Commissioner Majaffer.
I'd like to call up Ronnie Verdugo from the League of Cities. I know they've had something to say on this, and I don't think he had a speaker slip in, but.
Thank you, Commissioner Mandaffer. So the League and CSAC are more than happy to help disseminate any information that we need to push out to our local agencies. As you know, with SB1, there's a lot of reporting requirements that we're getting our folks used to, and any tools that the Commission and Division of Local Assistance can provide us with, we can help make sure that our agencies receive that information and come into compliance. As you know, with just their project list requirements, we've had over 99% compliance with that. And so I think we just need to be a resource and help communicate all of that. So we'd be happy to coordinate.
So the action item that you were asking for, Lori, or recommending?
The action item. It's on, okay. The action item was to add some language in the guidelines about consequences for not reporting.
Okay.
You still need to adopt it.
I, so,
Motion to adopt.
so we have a motion by Commissioner Alvarado, a second by Modafer. Is there any discussion?
Yes, I'm just going to reiterate that, there are districts that have submitted reports that were not reflected here. So I just wanted to make sure that the system works.
Okay.
I think we're right, but making sure that when we issue penalties, that they're fairly issued.
Sure.
As opposed to, just because we got a piece of paper that says people are delinquent when they may not be.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, we need to make sure our paperwork's right. So what would be the timing issue if we did not take action on your recommendation today and waited till the next meeting? What would change? Because we're told that by the next meeting, we would have a much shorter list, and to Commissioner Dunn's point, if, it's, maybe something hasn't worked through the queue line.
Well, I think, before you impose a sanction, you're going to make sure that you're going to do the research. So if somebody's prepared to get sanctioned and they raise their hand and say, wait a minute, here's our submittal, we're not going to impose those sanctions. So we can adopt this stuff. But we're not going to, I don't think staff or the department is going to just start whacking people without doing the research. That would be more embarrassing than being caught on the do not comply list.
I'm confused.
If you're being an idiot on the discipline list.
Aren't we directing staff, isn't what she's asking, directing staff
Yes.
to come up with penalties on the guidelines?
Right.
That's all she's asking, I believe.
Yes.
Yes.
But I thought she was suggesting the penalties.
No. She's
Okay.
amending the
No.
guidelines to include penalties, but
Yes.
we're not putting penalties on
We're
it.
not penalizing.
Okay, because that's not what the pink says. The pink is actually recommended.
Yeah.
It's for the 2019.
Impose a penalty.
So, Commissioners,
Let's say-
in answer to the chair's question about the impact of deferring, anything the commission would take on action on now, or if not, direct staff to have do some more work on this, would be also coming to the commission in May as a part of the approval process for the 2019 Active Transportation Program guidelines. Additionally, Lori is convening one more workshop to have some discussion about this with our partners. So if the commission wishes to defer, we can still incorporate these and other making sure and other items, making sure there's adequate warning into the guidelines that we'll be bringing back in May for adoption.
Okay, so the motion was to adopt these, to amend the guidelines. Okay.
Commissioners, really, let me just clarify, this book item is really providing staff direction from the commission in moving forward on as we convene our workshops and we develop guidelines for the 2019 Active Transportation Program. But we also have a lot of projects that the commission has already funded. And so we need to work that out as far as retroactive. So staff is looking for direction from you through these recommendations to hear from you that we are on the right track. And we will also use this item, your action today, to inform as we move forward on an amendment to the accountability guidelines that you adopted yesterday and looking at what those sanctions are as well. So we really developed this to seek guidance from you through an action so that we're on we understand the commission's perspective as we move forward.
Okay, are we ready for a vote then? Everybody understands the motion. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Motion carries. Okay, so we have our directions, and one way or another, we're going to shorten the list, right? So, okay, so we had items 87, 88, and 89 were withdrawn, and we worked really hard yesterday, so I think we're ready for any public comment today. If not, I will adjourn this meeting straight up at